in a room so bright, talking science under starry skies. Artificial minds of space inside, deep dive podcast taking flight. Cosmos mysteries they unfold, machines with wisdom, stories told. Future secrets, brave and bold, deep dive making hearts behold. Deep dive into the unknown. Science stars and minds have grown. Deep dive, voices so clear. Journey with us far and near. Deep dive into the unknown. Science stars and minds have grown. Deep dive, voices so clear. Journey with us far and near.
So we're diving into Gentry Lee's So You Want to Be a Systems Engineer.
Yeah.
And wow.
That's a juicy one.
It really is. Like, it gets at the heart of what makes a successful systems engineer.
Yeah.
And not just, like, the skills you put on a resume. It's
Yeah.
like, what makes someone uniquely suited to this kind of work?
It's interesting. He kind of throws down the gauntlet right away. Lee's saying, look, just knowing the processes is like an artist who only knows how to hold a brush.
Okay.
Useful, sure, but it's not going to get you a show at a museum.
No.
Oh.
It's about who you are, right? That makes the masterpiece.
Exactly.
Okay, so if it's not just about checking boxes on a technical skills list, what's Lee's recipe for that systems engineering magic?
He breaks it down into 10 core characteristics. He calls them the 10 commandments.
Ooh, okay.
And the cool thing is, they're not just for rocket scientists.
Right.
These are like little nuggets of wisdom you can apply anywhere.
Ooh, I like that. Systems engineering is a life hack. I'm here for it.
Exactly.
Hit me with commandment number 1.
It all starts with intellectual curiosity. And I'm not just talking about being a little bit curious. I mean really wanting to get under the hood of things.
Right.
Never stop asking why or how. Like, if figuring out how things tick really gets you going, that's a good sign.
It's like those people who can't take "because I said so" for an answer.
Yes, exactly.
They got to know the why behind the what.
Exactly. And Lee says that's what pushes good systems engineers beyond just their job description. They're always thinking bigger picture. How does their piece fit into the whole puzzle?
And that leads perfectly into commandment number 2, the big picture view. So it's not enough to just be a master of your little domain. You need to get the whole, the whole tapestry of the project.
Exactly right. And Lee breaks this down into 3 parts. First, the programmatic view. Basically, understanding the project's entire journey, from the first what if to the day it's up and running, and how your piece fits into each stage.
Okay, so you're not just focused on your to-do list for today. It's like you've got this mental roadmap of the entire project's life, right?
Exactly.
But what were the other 2 parts of big picture again?
The second piece is the science behind it all. It's not enough to just build a cool gadget. You got to understand the fundamental questions it's trying to answer. He gave this example of someone at JPL who kind of mumbled through what they were working on. A good systems engineer, they know they're helping to answer big questions about the universe. They get that their work is part of something profound.
That's inspiring. It's like you're not just building a satellite, you're contributing to our understanding of, well, everything. Okay, that's heavy stuff. But what was that third piece of the puzzle?
Right. The third piece is about how everything's connected. Like this web, or Lee uses the analogy of a barium trace.
A what?
It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. Imagine putting a drop of dye in a glass of water, right? You can see how it spreads out, affects the whole thing. Systems are like that. A tiny change in one place can have a ripple effect somewhere else.
So a good systems engineer is always playing mental chess, thinking 5 moves ahead. How's this going to affect everything else?
Exactly. Always thinking about those ripple effects. And that's super important because in the real world, things rarely go exactly to plan. Which brings us to Lee's next commandment, being comfortable with change.
Oh, change, that old friend. But I bet in a field as complex as, well, space exploration, change is just part of the deal, right?
You got it. Lee's point is, change is unavoidable in systems engineering. Requirements change, priorities get shuffled, new discoveries throw you a curveball. You got to be able to roll with it. It's like the difference between solving problems in a textbook where everything's neat and tidy and navigating a river.
Ooh, I like that analogy. Some people, that constant change would freak them out, but others, they'd thrive on it.
Exactly. And that's another thing Lee talks about, how success in school doesn't always equal success in systems engineering.
Right, because in school there's usually one right answer.
Yeah, right.
But in these big engineering projects, the right answer might change every day.
That's it. It's like the difference between a multiple choice quiz and, I don't know, an open-ended design challenge.
Ooh, yes.
One has a clear right answer. The other, you got to weigh all these factors, make judgment calls, be okay with not always knowing for sure.
Okay, so that takes us to Lee's fourth commandment, right? Comfort with uncertainty.
You got it.
Okay, let's unpack that one because that seems like a biggie,
It is.
especially in a world as, well, uncertain as space. So what does he mean by that?
He's talking about two main things. First, you got to be fluent in the language of probabilities and statistics. But it's not just about memorizing formulas. It's about really understanding that you can't predict everything with 100% certainty.
Oh, for sure.
There's always a chance of something unexpected happening.
So it's about understanding the odds, managing risks, and making the best call you can with the information you have.
Yes, and that information is often incomplete. And that's where the second part of uncertainty comes in what he calls uncertain uncertainty, or the unknown unknowns. The things you don't even know you don't know. The stuff that can really throw you for a loop.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. How do you prepare for something you can't even imagine?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Lee's point is you can't predict the unpredictable. But you can design systems that are flexible enough, adaptable enough to handle surprises.
Okay.
It's about designing for resilience.
So it's almost like he's advocating for a healthy dose of paranoia.
He is. That's actually his fifth commandment. Proper paranoia.
Okay, now we're talking. I love that he calls it proper paranoia because it implies, like, a balance.
Yes.
Be cautious, but don't let it paralyze you.
Exactly. He talks about how a lot of engineers come from top schools, used to acing every test.
Right.
But in systems engineering, that mindset can trip you up. You need that healthy skepticism, the ability to question assumptions, even when everyone else is nodding along.
So you're saying it's better to speak up and be wrong than to stay silent and miss a potential disaster.
He calls it commission, not omission.
I like that.
Meaning, it's better to raise a concern even if you're wrong than to say nothing and have something go wrong.
So it's about creating a culture where people feel safe to speak their minds,
Exactly.
even if it means disagreeing with the boss.
Especially then. And to illustrate this, he uses this great example, the impactor targeting system for the Deep Impact mission.
Oh, you mean the mission where they, like, smashed a spacecraft into a comet?
That's the one. Think about that system. It had to navigate to this tiny, fast-moving comet and hit it at a precise point, all while taking pictures.
That's amazing.
Talk about high stakes.
Right. I can't even imagine the number of things that could have gone wrong.
And that's where proper paranoia was essential. They thought of every possible failure point, built in redundancies, tested everything a million times.
Wow, it sounds intense.
It was. But when you're dealing with billions of dollars and potentially groundbreaking scientific discoveries, that's the level of meticulousness you need.
It's the difference between a dazzling success and, well, a very expensive failure. So that attention to detail, that's got to extend beyond just the technical stuff too, right?
Absolutely. Lee's next commandment is all about resources and margins.
Okay, so that sounds like we're talking budgets and deadlines.
It's bigger than that. He's saying it's not enough to just scrape by, to just meet the minimum requirements.
Okay.
He makes this distinction between just meeting requirements and having true capability.
So it's like the difference between barely passing a test and acing it with flying colors.
That's it. Anyone can build a spacecraft that can technically fly to Mars. A good systems engineer builds one that can handle the bumps along the way, you know?
Right.
The unexpected stuff.
So they design in a margin for error for those unknown unknowns we talked about.
Exactly. Like, he used the example of adjusting the parachute deployment parameters for the Mars rovers. Spirit and opportunity, remember them.
Of course.
Having that deep understanding of what the system could really do, not just its minimum specs, that's what allowed them to make those last-minute adjustments and stick the landing.
It's like that's the kind of decision-making you can't learn from a textbook.
Right.
You need that gut feeling, that intuition for when to push the limits and when to play it safe.
And that takes us to his next commandment, communication skills.
Okay, now that's something that applies to pretty much every job out there. Being able to clearly explain your ideas and actually listen to other people.
It's crucial, and systems engineers can't afford to be lone wolves. They're always working with people from all different backgrounds, explaining complex things.
Right.
It's like being a translator. But for engineering, science, and management all at once.
I love that analogy because it's true. It's not enough to just be brilliant in your own head. You have to be able to bring other people along with you.
And that means being a good listener, not just a good talker. He really emphasized that.
Oh, I bet.
He's not a fan of people who just want to hear themselves talk, you know?
Oh, I know the type.
You got to really listen to everyone, understand their perspective,
Yeah.
especially the people who might not be the loudest voices in the room.
Because sometimes the quiet ones have the best ideas.
Yeah.
But creating that kind of environment where everyone feels heard, that takes a certain level of confidence, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
And energy.
You're reading Lee's mind again. That's his 8th commandment. Self-confidence and energy.
So you're telling me, on top of everything else,
Yeah.
you got to be charismatic.
It's not just about being the smartest person in the room. You got to inspire confidence in other people, make them want to follow your lead.
Especially when things get tough.
Especially then. And he talks about this balance between projecting that confidence, but also being humble enough to admit when you're wrong.
Oh, absolutely. Because nobody's right all the time.
Exactly.
But even acknowledging that,
Yeah.
it's still exhausting, right? I mean, to maintain that level of energy day in and day out.
It takes passion. And this is something Lee has in spades. You can tell he truly believes in the power of systems engineering
Right.
to solve big problems, to help us understand the universe. And that passion, it's infectious.
It's true. It comes through in his words.
It's what keeps him and his teams going, even when they face setbacks, which they inevitably do.
Because let's be honest, no project goes perfectly. So it's like he's saying, find the thing you're passionate about,
Yes.
and the energy will follow.
And that passion fuels his appreciation for process, which is actually his 9th commandment.
Okay, appreciation for process. That sounds a little counterintuitive, right?
Right.
I mean, earlier he was all about being flexible, adapting to change. Now we're talking about sticking to the rules.
It's not about blindly following a rule book. It's about understanding the why behind the how. Lee acknowledges that processes are important. They provide a framework, prevent things from descending into chaos, especially on big projects.
Okay, so processes are important, but they shouldn't be too rigid.
Exactly.
It's about knowing when to follow the recipe and when to improvise. Right?
You got it. It's like he compares it to being a jazz musician.
Ooh, I love
You have the foundational knowledge, the scales and chords, but the magic happens when you improvise, when you go off script.
Yes. So it's about finding that balance between structure and creativity,
Exactly.
between sticking to the plan and knowing when to throw it out the window and just go with your gut.
That's exactly what sets the best systems engineers apart. They're not just following a set of instructions, they're thinking critically, anticipating challenges, coming up with innovative solutions to problems nobody's ever seen before.
So it's about having a little bit of the artist in you, even as an engineer.
Absolutely. And that artistic sensibility ties into his final commandment, which is kind of a surprising one.
Okay, you're killing me with the suspense. What's the 10th commandment?
It's a deep appreciation for the beauty and power of systems.
Okay.
And I don't just mean the nuts and bolts, but the elegance of how everything works together to achieve something remarkable.
I never thought about systems engineering as having an artistic side. But the more we talk about Lee's commandments, the more I see it. It's like that feeling you get when you look at a beautifully designed building or a piece of code that's just like perfectly elegant.
Exactly. And Lee says that appreciation, that sense of wonder at what systems can do, that's what fuels the best in the field. It's what motivates them to keep pushing the limits.
It's like they're not just building machines, they're composing symphonies of science and engineering. But this whole idea of the best in the field, it makes me think about something else Lee mentioned. His concern about the next generation of systems engineers. What did he say about that again?
He's worried there aren't enough people with this unique skill set, especially those who can handle the pressure of a billion-dollar project.
Right.
It's not just technical skills, remember?
Right.
It's leadership, communication, that comfort with uncertainty we were talking about.
Because when you're dealing with projects on that scale,
Yeah.
it's not just about managing systems, it's about managing people, expectations. It's like conducting an orchestra, except the music might change at any moment.
Exactly. And that's where Lee's emphasis on intellectual curiosity and lifelong learning comes in.
Right.
He's saying the best systems engineers, they never stop learning. They're always questioning, refining their craft.
So it's about building a culture of continuous improvement, where people feel comfortable admitting they don't know everything.
Exactly. He even says aspiring systems engineers should cut their teeth on fault protection work.
Fault protection. Why that area specifically?
He thinks it's the best training ground for systems thinking. It forces you to think about everything that could go wrong, understand how everything's connected, and design for resilience.
So it's like taking that proper paranoia and putting it into practice.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
And he stresses that this kind of learning never really stops. A good systems engineer is always growing, always pushing the boundaries.
It's like a journey of constant discovery.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting.
It's about embracing the challenge, the complexity, even the failures.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to what I think is really at the core of Lee's message, that immense satisfaction you get from contributing to something bigger than yourself, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge.
He's clearly passionate about the work being done at JPL, about playing a role in humanity's exploration of the cosmos.
It comes through in everything he says. It's inspiring, even for someone like me who's not a systems engineer.
That's the power of genuine enthusiasm. And it reminds me of another point he makes about human connection. Even in a field that's often seen as very technical, very data-driven.
Right.
He talks about how email, teleconferencing, they have their limitations. They can never fully replace face-to-face interaction.
That's so true, especially when you're dealing with these complex problems that require brainstorming, creativity.
You need that in-person spark,
Right. You can't always get that through a screen.
He emphasizes the importance of showing up, being present in those spontaneous conversations, because that's often where the real breakthroughs happen.
It's about remembering that even with all our fancy technology, it's still people who are designing and building these amazing systems.
Exactly. And those connections, those moments of shared inspiration, that's where the magic happens.
Okay, now you're going to tell me about that story Lee tells, about the conference and the pool.
Yeah, so he's at this conference with a bunch of colleagues sitting around a pool, and that's where they cracked this problem that had been stumping them for weeks.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes you just need to step away from the whiteboard.
Exactly. You get so focused on the problem, you can't see the solution. But then you relax, you have those casual conversations, and boom, the answer hits you.
It's like those aha moments you hear about.
Exactly.
And it makes you wonder, how do you create a workplace that encourages those kinds of moments?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's not just about having brilliant people. It's about giving them the space to be brilliant together.
So it's about building a culture of collaboration.
Absolutely.
Where people feel safe bouncing ideas off each other.
And
not being afraid to sound a little crazy sometimes.
Exactly. Because sometimes those crazy ideas, those are the ones that change the world.
It's like that saying, the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas.
Right.
And sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. Which reminds me of something else Lee said about those billion-dollar projects. It's not just about avoiding failures, it's about learning from them.
Oh, absolutely. Lee's a big believer in that.
Because, let's face it, no matter how much planning you do, things are going to go wrong.
It's inevitable.
But it's how you handle those failures that really matters.
Exactly.
Do you sweep them under the rug and pretend they never happened?
Or do you use them as an opportunity to learn and grow?
Because those failures, they can teach you more than any success ever could.
They absolutely can't. And that ties into another important point Lee makes, humility. A good systems engineer, they know they don't have all the answers.
Right.
They're willing to admit when they're wrong and learn from their mistakes.
It's about having the courage to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to find out.
Exactly. And to create a culture where that's okay.
Because nobody wants to work in a place where they're afraid to make a mistake.
Exactly.
It stifles creativity, innovation. People need to feel safe to experiment, to take risks.
And to learn from those risks, whether they pay off or not.
Exactly. So I think what I'm taking away from all of this is that systems engineering, it's not just about technical skills.
Right.
It's about people. It's about communication, collaboration, and creativity. It's about being comfortable with uncertainty and never being afraid to ask why.
Lee said it best himself. Systems engineering, at its heart, is a deeply human endeavor.
I love that, because it's a reminder that even in the most technical fields, it's our human qualities, our curiosity, our ingenuity, our capacity for connection. Those are the things that really make a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've done a pretty good job diving deep into Gentry Lee's 10 Commandments.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. And you know what? I think there's something here for everyone, not just engineers.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you're running a business, leading a team, or just trying to navigate the complexities of life.
These principles, they apply to all sorts of situations.
Lee's talk is a great reminder that the best way to solve problems, big or small, is by embracing curiosity, collaboration, and that willingness to learn and adapt.
Couldn't agree more.
So to our listener, we leave you with this thought. What are your 10 commandments for success? What principles guide you in your work and life? Take some time to reflect on that, and who knows, maybe you'll discover your own secret sauce for achieving amazing things.
Or at least for navigating this crazy thing called life.
That's a whole other deep dive for another day. Until then, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.